We're still in the time of Herod, the insecure and violent puppet king who incited fear as authority, whose leadership condoned political violence, corruption, and retribution. But we're also in a time of resistance, fueled by a people who understood the fight for liberation, who sang and prayed, who organized, who doubted and failed. But they never resigned. Resignation implies a lack of hope, and I don't believe the people ever truly lost hope. This is the world Jesus was born into: control, occupation, pain, and a world seeking revolution. The coming of God in a vulnerable child shifted everything. The news on the street was that the Messiah had come. He was here to challenge the current regime, to offer something different. This is a time of competing values and competing voices. Empire told people to stay in line, to obey or else. A single authoritative voice ruled the land, proclaiming this death-dealing way. But there were other voices and dreams for another world. The remembered voices of prophets who foretold of another leader whose primary power would be expressed through love and justice. So we've already seen how each character in this story leading up to this moment responded physically. We felt Zechariah's tightened chest, Mary's cautiously surrendered yes, and the song of resistance that rose from her experience of God on the inside. Elizabeth's understanding of her cousin's pregnancy well before anyone else, and her rejoicing at the flutters in her own womb. Joseph's dream, his call to love and stay despite everything. And the shepherds, those on the outskirts who received the Annunciation together, who could validate each other's experience and encourage each other when they doubted. God met these people, their embodied fear, with the words, "Do not be afraid." God meets us in this embodied fear, in our embodied fear. God stays with us in the mess. In our unfinished world, we get Emmanuel. So breathe, really breathe, because God is with us in the middle of it all. But now we're a bit further along in the story, perhaps a year or two. The dream of liberation has not yet been fully realized. Herod is still in power, and perhaps even more violent, more insecure. The promised Messiah is born, and the tables have turned. A shift in the world is already apparent, and now it is he who experiences fear. Scripture says he's frightened. All of this in response to the wise ones, this visit from the Magi. Neither gendered nor numbered in this text, the Magi, however many of them there were, have discerned a significant shift based on astrological signs and confirm this knowledge through the scriptures. They employ what might be called a plurality of vision, holding both the power of science and understanding that there are always other ways of knowing, a knowing that took them back to the oral tradition and the messages and words of the prophets. The Magi move in faith, seeking, following the star, all based on the revelation of God as it manifests in the world around them. They understand that the universe participates in the mystery of God, that there are things we can know only about God, only through signs and our faithful response to them. The Magi show us a patient work, the patient work of watching what it is to study and to listen. They show us a faith willing to be changed by what it sees. Throughout this story, we've seen people respond to the call of these sacred values, the overarching sense of what is good and what is right. And they respond to sacred instructions given to them by angels and through dreams. Today, we're offered the signpost of a star. Whether it was a comet or supernova, our gospel writer calls it a star. Stars symbolize light and expanded vision, guidance and transformation. In biblical theology, stars do not determine your fate. They point beyond themselves. They offer revelation and invite your response. So our interest is less about an actual star than about how we interpret its significance in Epiphany. Here, today, we want to know who noticed, who moved, who was changed. I know a little bit about what it feels like to follow something you can barely name, something that asks for your attention and then asks you to move, compels you to move. My most recent memory of following such a sign was sometime around in 2013 when a fascination with church doors overtook me. And I know that's a strong word, overtook, but that's the best word for how it really felt. There's overwhelming sense of a fascination with church doors. I began to notice them everywhere. So call it a spiritual practice of noticing. But I'd take pictures of the doors, walk through those doors, journal about them, touch and pray over them. The doors were wooden and brass and of every size. Some were small and unassuming, simple and ornate. Others were overwhelming and even a little bit frightening at first. Well, this star invited my response, and over a period of years would lead me to seminary, and then, most surprisingly, toward the priesthood. I can't explain what listening like that meant for me, what responding beyond my understanding meant, what trusting like that did to me, how it shaped me, how the signpost of those church doors demanded my response and set me in motion to trust, to risk, and to follow. I think about those doors often. I'm as intrigued as ever and still guided by them. They were a portal of the expansion of my devotion to Christ, to a deepening of my faith, and to a renewed commitment and call, all in response to that signpost, the star that led me. Well, the Magi knew this too. They knew what it was to follow something beyond full understanding. They knew what it felt like when revelation demands not just attention, but action. When the star you've been watching calls you to move. They knew that guidance isn't passive observation. It's embodied response. This is what the Magi knew. This is how they responded to the star. They arrive in Jerusalem already aware that the Messiah is born and desire to pledge their allegiance to the new child king. But they want to pay homage to him first. And this is more than the giving of a gift. Paying homage is the giving of yourself. Rumors of any threat to his throne were more than enough to set Herod's anxiety ablaze. And it is this posture, this growing sense of allegiance to another king that causes fear in Herod and in all Jerusalem. All Jerusalem is the political religious elite, the traumatized people under his leadership who know how he responds to threats. It's the complicit and compromised. Going against Herod meant pitting themselves against all Jerusalem, not just defying a king, but defying the collective fear, the entire system of survival, a city's investment in keeping the status quo. Herod confirms the Messiah's birthplace with the chief priests and scribes who identify it as Bethlehem. But Herod wants more. He wants the wisdom and knowledge of the Magi, the details of the star's appearance. He wants the benefit of their careful attention, and then he wants their movement. He wants their bodies. He sends them to Bethlehem to gain access to the Christ child. They agree, but I can't help but wonder what they thought about the secrecy of that meeting, if they felt some odd stirring in their bodies because of it. Still, they follow the star, and the one they saw first at its rising, and it guides them to the exact location. And when they saw that the star had stopped right there over the place where the child was, they were overwhelmed with joy. Not quiet relief, not satisfaction, overwhelming, uncontainable joy. Joy is warmth spreading from your center that can no longer be held in. It's a smile that overtakes your whole face. Sometimes tears flow, the intermingling of jubilation and the sweetest relief. This was the joy of their arrival after uncertainty, the confirmation that everything they risked, every step taken in faith, it all landed here. The star was real. They'd been shown something true. They followed it, and they followed it to that moment. On entering the house, they saw the child with Mary, his mother, and in that joy, still overwhelmed with it, they knelt down. They bowed low, offering this embodied gesture of reverence and honor. They pay him homage. They give to him their whole selves. Then they give the gifts of frankincense, gold, and myrrh. These are gifts they carried throughout their journey, however long or however far it was. By weight, these were among the most expensive items in the ancient world. And when they arrived, they gave it to them. They gave these gifts to this holy family and perhaps unknowingly fund the next part of their journey. Because a few verses along, Joseph will respond to another dream and take his young family to Egypt. Does this obedience, this full surrender of these gifts, make that journey possible? But having done so in this fully surrendered posture, responding to these sacred instructions, the guidance of a star, the Magi keep the energy of the Spirit's movement alive. And then from the space of dreams, they discern that they will return home by another way, another road. This is the posture they began with, listening, attentive, guided, responsive. To follow the star, to trust the dream, to go another way. The Magi resist not just a king, but a whole city's fear. In watching, discerning, and then trusting what they'd been shown, these sacred instructions, they stand in resistance to King Herod and a system built on fear and control. They change the course of the world by doing so, and they change it for good. When I followed those doors, those church doors, one after the other, and into the Episcopal Church, then to seminary and the priesthood, I had no idea what I was doing or who would be impacted by the risk I was taking in following something that was so clear to me but couldn't be explained to anyone else. I still don't know, and I'm still always a little scared. But every day, and sometimes with tears in my eyes, I get up and I follow as part of my commitment to an ongoing obedience. I don't know which conversations will matter, which rooms I'll be invited into, or whose life might shift because I said yes. Because I'd said yes to what I'd been shown. And I'm not sure I ever will be. I'm not sure I ever will know. But the Magi didn't know either. They followed, they gave, they went home. The story continued without them. And that's the nature of these sacred instructions. You're faithful to what you've been shown, and you trust God with what you can't see. So where is your star? What have you been shown, even if you can't fully name it? What keeps capturing your attention? What door keeps appearing? What dream keeps returning? And perhaps the harder question, are you willing to follow it? Even if you can't see the whole picture, even if others think you're foolish, even if it costs you something, even if you never know the full outcome. The Magi teach us that following, leaning into those sacred instructions requires watching and listening. It calls us to trust what we've been shown, even when others don't see it, and to move in response to the star. It requires complete surrender and sometimes going another way, releasing our control of outcomes. It requires that we trust the mystery. In Epiphany, we celebrate that the light has come, that we understand the manifestation of Jesus as Messiah in the world. And that light is our knowing, our openness to an awareness of this shift, the following of these sacred instructions. It is the deepening of our knowledge and a confidence that arises and enlarges as we grow closer to God and closer to each other. But it all begins with discerning and doing, noticing and following, watching and moving. If you've been shown a star, if you've received sacred instructions that you know you need to follow, I'm going to invite you to set your bulletin aside and take your hand and just place it on your heart as a sign of commitment. So that's if you've received sacred instructions that you know you need to follow, you place your hand on your heart as a sign of that commitment. And so this is not to me or this community. This is your commitment to what you've been shown and to the God who is guiding you. And then, as a more complete acknowledgement of what you've seen and have committed to, I invite you to rise, like stand up in your seat, from your seat. Stand up, rise up into your commitment. Just stand here as we physically embody and breathe into these promises that we've made. You know, only you know the star you're to follow. Only you know the commitment you're making right now. The commitment you're making to seeing, noticing, and discerning. Your commitment to following. And then just take that hand and let it reach toward that star. Let it reach towards that star. This is active posture. Your other hand is just resting at your side, but this one hand is reaching. Reach toward that star. This is your commitment, your promise, your oath to follow. And then slowly return that hand to your chest and just tap it for a minute. Tap it, tap it, tap it. Maybe speed that up a little bit. Generate a little heat and activity and energy. And then slow it down. Slow it down. Slow it down. Slow it down. And just here, breathe. Just 2 more breaths. Enjoy this stillness. And just bow your hearts with me as I pray. God of dreams, doors, messages, and stars, awaken us to your voice, your guidance, and direction. Help us, God, to see. As we walk the path of your sacred instructions, give us courage and heart to follow. In surrender, may we know the fullness of joy. May it be felt as light in our bones. Soften us to the vulnerability of a bow, the reverence of holy homage. Illuminate the cost of sacrifice. Bless us as we embrace the path, as we go, as we commit to this other way. Amen. Amen.